Okay, hi. My name is Abe. I'm a software engineer at Etsy. And I've kind of cut my teeth on using APIs by going to lots of hackathons over the years and using dozens of APIs to create lots of different mashups and apps. And so I've kind of got this sense for what makes a good API. And it's the same kind of sense that informs me what makes a good product. And so I want to propose that we start treating our APIs like actual products and less as like side things that kind of are in this weird, tumorous kind of state to the rest of our business. We have to treat them like real products and devote real kind of resources. So we'll get started. So before we make that kind of claim, we have to define what a product actually is. Products are everywhere. You know, you're wearing, my clothes are a product, you're sitting in chairs. Those are product, those are produced by people. Those are physical things. I got a root beer bottle here. I don't know if you guys have a root beer on this side of the pond, but it's delicious. And it's a drink. And so there's two products here, actually. There's the bottle that comes in and the drink itself. And you use the bottle to drink the drink. In a tech context, our products usually are web properties. And we call that our product. That's what we ship. That's the thing that we all make together. And that's what we sell. So we can kind of distill all that into a definition. That a product is something you either use or consume. So it's a pretty big generalization, but I think it's safe to say that we can kind of split all kinds of products into those two categories. You either use it or you consume it. Okay? Back to root beer, you use the bottle it's in to consume the beverage. Of most physical products we use, most food we consume. On the internet, we both use and consume. Okay, we're sitting here, Etsy.com. Etsy, by the way, is a handmade marketplace, right? Where buyers can connect with sellers to buy things that these sellers list on the site. It's almost like a personalized Amazon. And so buyers use Etsy.com to find things to buy. Sellers use Etsy.com to sell their items. And they both kind of consume. I mean, consume is a really odd word these days. Basically, it means it's like to read, to watch a video. It's called consumption. Because there really isn't a better word for it. But it seems odd when you think about it that way. But on Twitter, like you use Twitter to consume tweets. And so Twitter is a product, and no one's going to argue with that. So by this definition, if you agree with it, then you'll agree that my clicker's not working. Oh, there we go. Just haven't pointed. Okay, you'll agree that your API is a product because people use it and they consume it. But it's not regular people who use your API. It's developers who are using your API. They're using it to build applications. And it's also not the developers who are consuming it. It's the applications they build are consuming data from the API. So like a regular user would go to Etsy.com and consume all the listings and then read them. Your API will use Etsy.com to consume data from the API and then present that as an application to the final user. But it's a tool to developers. And so with that in mind, we could say APIs are like hammers. They're things people use to build things. Right? Developers use your API to build their apps. So they're like app hammers. Hammers are products, and APIs are also products. But before we talk even more about products, we have to talk about process, right? Because organizations are what gets together and just produces a single product. Apple, you know, without the whole entire company, I wouldn't have the iPhone in my pocket. So they make the product. And so let's examine how that process works in a tech context. So for most tech products, you'll have something that looks kind of like this. A manager of sorts who will kind of determine how the product fits into the rest of the business, how it needs to function, maybe a designer who will determine how the product looks. And there's lots of other people too. This is, again, a vast simplification and generalization. There'll be like business intelligence folks and marketing folks who kind of put their inputs. But after all that stuff's done, you have a vision of the product. And then often, you'll kind of ship it to the engineers and say, build this. And the engineers will do it. Now, I'm not saying this is an especially good way to go about product development. It's not really how we do it at Etsy. But it turns out to be the best way to do it often. Because these guys know product very well. Engineers certainly get the lead in terms of how they implement it. No one's going to argue with them there. But in terms of what the product actually turns out to be, they don't have much say. And so that's not really true for API development on the most part, right? I've seen so many cases where you get an API at a hackathon, and I'll meet the guy who wrote it, And I'm like, yeah, you wrote this API? He's like, yeah, just me. In this huge company, I'm the only one who wrote this API. And I kind of did it in my spare cycles, and just because someone in upper management wanted one, so we did it, and we didn't really pay much attention to it. So you got one engineer working on this entire API. And imagine for a second that that was how products were run. That'd be insane. You wouldn't have one sole person. You wouldn't have Milt, working on your product that you ship and make money on, and that's associated with your brand, and that's part of your strategy. You wouldn't do that. And you can't do it with your API either. You have to give your engineers in charge of your API the resources they need to create a good product. Give them the attention they need. Give them the people they need. Now, however that manifests itself is up to you, really. I mean, I don't know if you want to assign a devoted product manager and a designer and a business intelligence guy and all those people to create this product as a traditional product. APIs aren't traditional products, but you have to treat them like they are types of products. So I mean, I think I would agree that an engineer should be in the lead, but he should adopt product manager type roles and lead a whole team of engineers who kind of assume tasks, like regular product tasks, but appropriated to the API. Now, design is very important. When you want to talk about products, you have to talk about design. Speaking of Apple, right? I think like Apple's products are designed very well, and I think it's safe to say that they're one of the reasons, a large part of the reason that they're the most valuable company in the world is because of the strength of design of their products. And of course, they've got a lot of other great things going for them as well, like their marketing, the supply chain, strength of the brand. But I think it's, if they had all that, but not good design products, they probably wouldn't be where they are today. So this is something we know, something that's been proven over and over again. Startups in the web space have kind of been taking this to an extreme, differentiating themselves on product alone. Designers in a lot of new startups are often more sought after than engineers because no matter how well your product is engineered, if it doesn't look good and function well, you're not going to get users. And so users have come to expect good experiences in their interactions with the product. So this extends to APIs as well. Because if you have a badly designed API, the developer who's using it is not going to use it well. All right? But the problem is, like, how can you have a well-designed API? It doesn't really seem to make much sense or fit the traditional notion of what design is. When you think design, you think of something that's shiny and sleek and looks good and it's chromed out and it's easy to use like a regular API. But an API, like a regular product, but APIs are just text. You make an API call, and this is what you get back. So how can that be designed well? We have to redefine what we mean by design. So at its highest abstract level, we can say that design is usability, right? So all those things I said before, like it's good looking, it's fine to hold, it's easy to use. It all means that those are manifestations of the fact that this thing is easy to use, and that any well-designed product is easy to use, right? You have a good chair, you sit on it, and it's usable, it's easy to use. Your API needs to be easy to use as well, right? Hammers, right? Back to hammers. Hammers are very easy to use. They're designed well. A good designed hammer, it will be easy to hold, it won't give you blisters, it'll be weighted properly so you can hit it the right way. And that's also, you can build things with it. So same with your APIs, you have to design them well so you can build things with them. But I guess I haven't answered the question, what it actually means to have a well-designed API. Well, so what's an API? It's you make a call to a certain URL and you get data back. So there's two things right there. The URL needs to be something that's intuitive, that you would expect to get the kind of data you want back from it. So if we take a look at the Etsy API, we can see that it's got a fairly straightforward data layout in terms of what the site is. There's shops, and the shops are run by sellers, and the sellers have their listings, and each listing is images, and there's all kinds of associated data. And so you want to get the data for a shop. I know you guys aren't technical, but you can just look at the URL. It's super easy, right? You have shops, and give it the shop ID. So there's a colon there. The colons indicate a number that can change, right? So I have a shop ID, and I can query /shop/ID, and I'll get the shop. And if I want to get the active listings for the shop, I go to shop/ID/listing/active. It makes sense. It's what you might think to do if you were designing this from scratch. Same with listings. If I want to get a listing, I go to /listings/listing ID. I get the listing. If I want to get all the images, I just add /images to it, and I get it all. And that's pretty good. It's intuitive. It doesn't really require documentation because developers are, they're pretty, they don't want to read documentation. No one wants to sit there and read manuals, right? Apple products come with manuals. No one reads them though. They're kind of designed to transcend documentation. Hammers. You don't need to read a manual to know how to use a hammer because it's very easy to use. It's designed with that in mind. And badly designed interfaces, badly designed machines and anything will require, they ship with manuals and you have to read them if you want to use them, which is terrible. But that's a sign of bad design. Right now, I'm not saying don't have documentation. You need to have documentation because you can't tell people, go to this URL. They wouldn't know to go to openapi.etsy.com/version2. They wouldn't know to do that. So you have to have documentation to explain this stuff. But you shouldn't. It should be a kind of thing where I go to it once, I'm like, okay, that makes sense, and then I'm done with it. I don't need to go back to it and continually referring to it. So that's just that'll be a symptom that you have a badly designed API if you're relying too heavily on documentation. Friction is also an important thing when it comes to design. Friction is a design concept that basically says that it's the number of things that stand in the way of your user doing what you want them to do. Okay, so if you have like 10 clicks for a conversion, that's like 10 units of friction. And the goal, in most cases, is to reduce the number of friction to make it, again, as easy as possible for a user to do what you want them to do. Because they don't do what we tell them to do, even though that'd be nice. So Amazon, obviously, is taking this to an extreme. If you set it up, you can have one-click purchases. So just one single click will buy you and ship you an item on Amazon, no questions asked, which is so little friction, because what they sorely want you to do as a user is buy stuff from Amazon. And so that's a well-designed product. Same with APIs. You don't want to burden the developer with all kinds of registration and applications and all this kind of stuff before you can actually play with your API. That's friction for the developer. Because you want, as an API provider, you want lots of developers to use your API to create lots of apps. And so you have to make it easy for them to do so. So we at Etsy, we actually do have registration. That's because, and most people do, and this is the principle behind this is because if you don't have registration, you don't force developers to include their API keys with every request, there's nothing stopping them from making millions of requests and you won't be able to stop them. So this is the purposes for rate limiting. But apart from that, you don't need to email us, you don't need to wait any time, you'll immediately be able to get it and start playing with it, and it's super easy. You don't need to do any crazy authentication. In general, when it comes to the data behind your API, it's best to keep all the data that's possible to be open as possible. Which means like there's a lot of sensitive user data. For example, if you're running a Facebook app, you're not going to be able to access all the user's information. But there are public things you can access. And oftentimes, though, in APIs, and as a developer, you have to write authentication software to allow the user to authenticate. And this is a pain in the ass. So this is not fun to do. So, but sometimes public information will be siloed behind these authentication schemes, which is not good. So do the work to get it out as much as you can for free, and only require authentication when they absolutely need it. And if they do need it, the developer won't have a problem writing it. You need to have a proper presence on your website for your API. This is basic stuff, right? You wouldn't ship a product and not have a good-looking section of your website. This is etsy.com/developers. That's the current paradigm for most APIs. I can go to most excellent API providers and just go to that username, the domain name /developer, or something like developer.something.com. So I can do that without even looking for a link. And so I know where to go. We have a clear call to action. This is again, basic stuff. That's we want developers to use it. We make it easy for them to do it. We've got all the information they need. Of course, we have job openings, because if they're a developer, they're probably going to be interested maybe in working for us, or maybe we're interested in having them. But you don't have to have that, because you'll steal our programmers. Okay, products. Yeah, so products still, a good product has a lot of features. The iPhone is the sum of all the features it has. So there's a phone on it, there's a cool touch screen, it can tweet, it can go on the internet, it can do all these things, and that's what makes the iPhone a very cool thing. Your API is a product. It needs to have cool things. Okay, it's not a given that just because you have, even if you have cool data, if you don't allow access to it in easy ways, that's a bad feature. So having all the different data and lots of different ways to access it, those are features for your API. And so at Etsy, we have a regular API, which you can access all the regular data. It's kind of the standard stuff you expect. But we also have a real-time API, where every single listing on the site that's uploaded gets pushed to the developer in real time, which is like, it's the most incredible, cool, amazing thing. And so you'll set it up and you'll have like hundreds of listings being streamed to you every second. And that's something you couldn't do otherwise. So by building this, we allow our developers to make some really, really awesome things with our API that they couldn't otherwise do. That's a killer feature. And it's a lot of our apps are based on this. So think of ways, put yourself in the developer shoes, saying, what's a really cool thing that I would want to have in an API that maybe I'll build apps on and then give it to them. And if you can figure out, ask them, and then build what they say. Again, APIs are hammers, right? Hammers have features. It's got a hammering end, it's got a nail pulling end, it's got a handle. If it didn't have any of those, it would be less of a hammer. It wouldn't be a complete, good, awesome product. And now marketing. So a product isn't a product without marketing. I wouldn't have this in my hand today if Apple didn't have a marketing department to convince me to buy it. And so, like any product, you have to market to the demographic you're trying to sell to. And of course with APIs, we're not trying to sell to regular users, we're trying to sell it to developers who are infinitely, we're not susceptible to regular, at least we like to think we're not, to regular marketing techniques. So you can't just throw up a couple banner ads and or whatever and expect us to use your API. We're builders, we like to build. So the current trend is to use, you can't just tell us how awesome our API is, which a lot of people do, and we do come to expect certain standards of APIs, but just letting us know about it isn't going to make us want to use it. So the current trend is to use developer evangelists, who their job is to go around to tech events and hackathons and meet with developers and say, hey, let's build something cool together with my API. And if you've got a well-designed API and it's cool and it's awesome, you can make some really cool apps. And so I've gotten started with tons of APIs. Probably Twilio that you've seen today. I use Twilio because of the direct result of an evangelist's actions. And these are measurable. You can take metrics on it. You can judge how successful an evangelist is based on how many apps that he directly influences, or she. And so this is how you get people to actually use the API in the world. And it's also a little bit of QA, right? Because you can see if the evangelist himself is having trouble using the app, that's your first line of defense against a bad product. Okay, so say you do all this. Say you've got a team of engineers working on your app, on your API. It's well designed. It looks good. It's got cool features. There's not a lot of friction to use it. You got an army of evangelists going out there pimping it to the world. Have you succeeded at API? Well, it depends. What does success look like at the API level? Because again, APIs are products, but they're not traditional products because you don't sell them necessarily. Some of you may, but most APIs you don't actually sell. They're kind of complementary. So this is for you to decide what success looks like at your companies with your API. So I can't tell you what that means, but what I can tell you is the questions to ask. But you probably already know the questions to ask because you already ship products. Okay? And you start by asking, what are my core business goals? Presumably you know what your core business goal is. At Etsy, our core business goal is to grow our marketplace so we have more buyers buying more things from more sellers. Okay, once you've answered that question, you ask yourself the next question: how does my API complement these particular goals? And so at Etsy, a successful API ecosystem for us does two things. It either helps buyers buy more things and helps sellers sell more things. And so we've built our API with these two things in mind. These are the kinds of apps we want because they help increase our bottom line. They help grow our marketplace. And if you go on the app gallery, you'll find these two kinds of apps. You'll find buyer discovery apps, which are one of the biggest problems, and you'll find seller tools that help with inventory management and things like that. And so that's exactly what we want. So this is success for us. And it's measurable too, because after people use these tools and then they buy things off the site, and it's simple. It's a simple strategy, and it's working. And it's not some convoluted thing where it's like we hear the word apps and we're like, yeah, I want apps because apps are hot and we're just going to have an API and it's going to be great. We're just going to build all kinds of apps and that'll increase our mind share or something. Like these are concrete goals, just like a regular product. Okay, you wouldn't take have a regular product development effort and half-ass it. You wouldn't just kind of throw it against the wall and waste resources on it without a proper way of kind of getting a return and making money for yourselves. Like that. It might happen at a bigger company where you have like labs or something. But generally, if you expend resources into developing a product, you want it to succeed. And so by not thinking this through, you're setting your API up for failure. And maybe you will answer these questions, and you'll figure out, like, hey, like, I know APIs are really awesome, and I know in theory it sounds good that we would have an API because we've got a nice digital business. It'd be cool to have apps, but I can't actually answer how that would complement our core business. In which case, the answer to that question was, if you even need an API, it would be no. And that's a good thing, because that means shelve your resources, devote them to your actual product that you do have an answer for, and then when you're ready, when the marketplace is ready, and when your company as an organization is ready for an API that can complement your core business goals in direct ways, then go ahead and build it. And do it right, and treat it like a product. So that's it. My name's Abe.